Welcome to Notebook 12, Hello World with OpenAI. In this notebook, we're going to learn how to interact with the OpenAI API to generate text completions using the Llama 3.1 8B Instruct model. This introductory section is going to help us to understand the basics of setting up and using the OpenAI library for interacting with large language models. As an aside, before we begin, since you're listening to this walkthrough, I know that you're listening to this walkthrough, but I do want to let you know that the notebooks themselves, especially from this point forward, are by and large quite self-contained. So, if you find that you're less interested in the timing of watching a video and would rather work through the materials yourself, I just want to encourage you and let you know that that's perfectly fine. There'll certainly be situations where I add some additional context or commentary in my video walkthrough. However, the vast majority of what I'll be speaking about is already contained in the notebook themselves. So if you really prefer a text-only approach, I'm actually a learner who tends to prefer a text-only approach, then you're more than welcome to skip the walkthroughs and just go through the notebooks themselves. But if you do enjoy the walkthroughs, that's fantastic, and we're going to start walking through this notebook together. So by the time you complete this notebook, you're going to understand how to set up and use the Python OpenAI library. You're going to be able to use it to generate text completions using the Llama 3.1 8B Instruct model that we have running in this local environment. You're going to learn how to interpret and utilize the responses you get back from the API. And furthermore, at the end, you're going to understand the importance of using chat completion endpoints with chat models like Llama 3.1 8B Instruct. And we're going to talk a little bit actually about what is meant by a chat model or an instruct model. So to begin, we're going to import the OpenAI library, which is going to enable us to interact with our locally hosted Llama 3.1 8B Instruct NIM. As we mentioned, one of the key benefits of using NVIDIA NIM are that they expose the OpenAI API. This is a very common API. And again, to repeat, as we've mentioned before, there's a lot of other large language models out there that also interact using the OpenAI API. So even though we're using an NVIDIA NIM with a Llama 3.1 Instruct model, pretty much all the code we're running here, if you swapped it out with an endpoint that was hosting a different model, assuming the model implemented the OpenAI API, which it probably does, then all of the code we're using here is going to work for you. Now, of course, the model responses are going to vary depending on the model that you use, but the code itself, assuming you hit the endpoint, should work without modification. So, and once more, just for the sake of context, this is the only notebook where we're actually going to react directly with the OpenAI API. Especially if you have LangChain at your disposal, I think you'll find pretty quickly it's much more convenient to work with. It has a lot of features that are a lot more powerful and reduce a lot of boilerplate. So, kind of with all that said, well, why are we spending the time to interact with the OpenAI API at all? Well, there's a couple of reasons why we chose to do that. First is, given all the claims we're making about exposing the OpenAI API, we think it's important to actually use a tool that directly leverages it to interact. And I think even perhaps a little bit more important, it's been my experience that online, there's a fair amount of folks using the OpenAI API in their code samples, in their documentation. Again, LangChain is widely used, very popular and very powerful, but it's not ubiquitous. So I think it's important at least to have a little bit of an exposure to the OpenAI API, such that when you come across it at a later point in time, you are at least familiar with it and familiar with what's going on when people use it. And furthermore, as you use LangChain, after working a little bit with OpenAI API directly via the OpenAI library here, it's both going to increase your appreciation for what LangChain does and also increase your understanding of what LangChain is doing under the hood. Okay, so to start using the OpenAI API, we need to set up the OpenAI client. This involves configuring the base URL, which is to say the URL where the LLM is actually residing and where it's exposing the API. And then furthermore, we need to provide an API key. So by default, OpenAI API servers listen on port 8000. That's just a convention. It's not always going to be true, but it is true in this environment and tends to be true. And the API exposes the /v1 endpoint. So in our case, in this environment, and you have the same environment that I do, we have a NIM running locally on the same machine where you're interacting with this Jupyter environment. And the NIM is available at a host called Llama. We've programmed the environment so that the host name is called Llama. In another environment, it might be localhost or it might be some external URL. But in our case, the host where the API server resides is called Llama. So therefore, to construct the base URL, in order to interact with the NIM, we'll use the Llama hostname, and then we'll use that in conjunction with port 8000 and the v1 endpoint. So with that in mind, here we construct the base URL at the Llama host on port 8000 at the v1 endpoint. So using the OpenAI client, which we're doing here, it turns out that the API key argument is a required argument. So in our case, the model is actually running locally, so we don't have any authentication set up on it. You don't actually need an API key to access it. But again, the OpenAI library is expecting and requires the argument. So we need to create an argument for the API key, and we're just going to set it to a string that says an arbitrary string right now. So we can now use the OpenAI library and pass it our base URL and pass it our granted mock API key. And in doing so, we'll create a client, an instance of an OpenAI client. So now that we've created the OpenAI client, a good first step is to observe any models that might be available to us. So in order to do this, we're going to use our client's models.list method. Here we're going to invoke it and store its response in a variable called available models. There's quite a bunch of information here that at our current time is not particularly important to us. So we're just going to drill down into it a little bit, and we can see for the first, and in this case only item, and the responses data, the ID of it is the string meta llama 31 AP instruct. So this is good news. We have confirmation, first of all, that we have a server running that we're able to actually interact with. And furthermore, kind of as we've discussed, but you don't have to take my word for it now, the server indicates that we have a llama 31 AP instruct model available for use. So having confirmed that, let's now use the client to make a simple request and generate a chat completion. To do this with the OpenAI library, having a client, we use the chat.completions.create method. This is going to expect a couple of parameters. The first is a model, and for model, it expects a string. It should match any IDs that were returned to us when we queried which models were available. In this case, meta llama 31 AP instruct. And next, it expects a list of messages. Now, especially as we're doing this kind of hello world exercise, we just want to pass in a single prompt, which we're going to say, tell me a short fun fact about space. But the fact that this prompt is wrapped in a list of messages, as we see here, and has something like a role and a content field, in section 2 of the course, we're going to look at a lot more detail about the use of roles, and you're going to find out soon about this idea of content. But for now, we're just going to assume this particular structure and pass our prompt in a way that we can tell you for the time being is the format that the OpenAI library expects. So having created a client and using its chat completions create method with the arguments specified, we can send that to the model and we will get back a response. If we print the response, we can see it's of some type called chat completion. There's a fair amount of information here. Some of this at times might be very helpful to you. However, for the time being, we're just going to drill in to one specific part of this response. And if we print that out, you can see we got a response back from the model telling us a fun fact. And here's a short fun fact about space, about the giant storm that's been raging on Jupiter for at least 150 years. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so you've now seen at least once, how we can send a prompt to our local Llama 3.1 model using the OpenAI library. And now as an exercise, just to get your hands dirty for the first time, please use our existing client to generate and print a response from our local 3.1 AP model with a prompt of your choice. We don't have any streaming implemented right now, so I recommend prompting it for something with a short response, so you don't have to wait a long time to get a long response back. As we'll be doing throughout the course, there's going to be a lot of exercises, and there's typically going to be a space that says your work here, which is kind of the place for you